Hello, my name is Vijay Swamidas and I'm a developer at Salesforce.com. Today I want to introduce Data Loader CLIq, which is a tool for making the Data Loader command line interface easier to configure and use. I'll first give a little background and then I'll show you a demo. Have you ever needed to run the same data loader process again and again, maybe once every week or once every couple of weeks? Or maybe you have a process that you'd like to automate, a set of leads that need to be imported every day. Well, the Data Loader command line interface can do that. The Data Loader documentation contains a section on setting up the command line interface. The first step is to read through it and get an idea of how it's all going to work. As you can see, there's a number of different topics that we need to understand. After we've read through that, we can get started. There's a file called encrypt.bat we have to run to encrypt our password. We have to create a processconf.xml file, which contains all of the parameters. The first time I did this, it probably took me an hour to set up. And I thought, you know what, there's got to be a better way. This is a little bit too confusing. What is CLIq? Well, CLIq is a guide that helps you get up and running very quickly with the Data Loader command line interface. Before we see a demo, let's take a look at a comparison between doing it yourself, or DIY, and CLIq. As you can see, there are a number of tasks to get started, and this is just a sample. But in general, doing it yourself requires running a lot of commands, editing files by hand, and CLIq provides a wizard for all of these same tasks. Okay, let's see how CLIq works in action. The first thing to do is to download the program from the CLIq website. And I'll provide this address again a little bit later. But right now I'm going to download the latest version for Data Loader version 18. And once it downloads, I'll just open up the zip file. And there should be a directory called CLIq. All I need to do is copy that and paste that into my Data Loader 18 directory. And all of this is described on the installation page under the wiki on the CLIq website. So now I've installed CLIq, and I'm going to open the directory, and inside there's a file called click.bat, and that's the file to start CLIq. So let's see how it works to set up an export with CLIq. First thing we do is to choose the operation. In this case, I'm going to choose export and type in a process name. The process name can be any arbitrary string. In this case, I'm going to choose export accounts. And now I'm going to type in my username and password and verify it. So this means that my username and password are correct. And now for export, we need to type in a query. And this is just a SQL query which the data loader will run to generate the data to export. And as you can see, I made a mistake and it shows the error in the result box. And I'll just fix that, and we click verify, and again it validates the query to make sure that I haven't made any mistakes, preventing me from having any problems later on. So I'll click the button to create the files. Everything was successful, and now let's take a look at that directory to see what files have been created. We go to a directory called click_process, and that's the process name we entered. And we have a batch file there that is ready to run. And that's going to run our export process that we created. So let's take a look at the data. You can see there's a CSV file under the right directory. And now we can see all of the data that came in as a result of that SQL query and that whole export process. So the whole thing from start to finish probably took about 2 minutes, including the download. And that is really what's so great about CLIq, is it helps you get started in such a short amount of time. Alright, let's see how CLIq works for doing an insert. I'm going to start CLIq again, and this time I'm going to choose insert. I'll type in a process name, insert leads, type in my username and password. And this time we're going to be presented with a little different screen. It's not a SQL query, but it's an object. So I want to do leads. And we can see that I made a mistake. There's no such object as leads, it's actually lead. And I'll click verify to make sure, and there it is. So that, again, helps prevent errors later on. Errors that you would likely run into if you were creating the configuration files by hand. So now that I've created this configuration, let's go take a look at it. We go back to the CLIq_process directory. There's our insert leads process. And this time, for doing DML operations, there's two additional steps. First thing we have to do is set up the CSV file. This is the file that Data Loader will use as its input data. And we need to replace this with real data. And the real data should have the field names in the first column. I have a CSV file here ready to go, and I'm just going to paste that on top of this sample file. And we'll take a look at the data that's in there. We can see that it's just some sample lead kind of information. Nothing fancy. But we now need to set up the SDL file. And this file is simply a mapping of the fields in the CSV to the fields in Salesforce. And I also have a file ready to go, and I'm just going to close this and go ahead and get the file from my demo library. And this SDL file has a mapping of the fields in my CSV to the fields in Salesforce. This is just a simple example of last name, company, and company. In your case, you could set this up using Data Loader, the user interface, or you could do it by hand. But in either case, it's a fairly simple process. Now let's run the batch file and see how this all works. We can see that it's running and loading. And let's take a look. Let's go back to Salesforce here. I can see that I don't have any lead. I have one lead. I'm going to refresh the page. And now there are three leads in there. And again, we can also see the log files that Data Loader created when the insert process ran. There are the success and error logs here under the log directory. Let's take a look at the success log. And we can see here that there's a record for each of the 3 leads that we inserted. And the status was that the item was created. So everything looks great there. So just to review, we had to do 2 extra steps. One was to create the SDL file, and then we had to provide the import CSV file. But it's still fairly easy. And at this point, you've got your batch file, and everything's ready to go. If you want to set that up with Windows Scheduler, you can have that run automatically. And as you can see, from start to finish, even that insert process, which is a little more complex, still only took about 2 to 3 minutes to get set up and running. Okay, let's take a look at a few notes on using CLIq. First of all, CLIq is meant to be a quick start tool. What this means is that after using CLIq, you may find that there are some parameters you'd like to have changed. In order to do that, you'll need to take a look at the Data Loader documentation. It's not a flaw in CLIq, but CLIq is really just meant to get you up and running quickly, not to be an all-inclusive configuration tool. The other thing you'll need to know is basic API concepts, such as object names and SQL queries, as you saw in our example. And finally, this has been tested on Windows and Mac OS X. I have heard of it being used on Linux, but have not tested on any other flavors of Unix. Data Loader CLIq is a public, open source community project. I would love to hear from you, and I hope you have a great experience using Data Loader CLIq.